Hello everyone, welcome to this new video. It only took me 9 months to do a new one. Honestly, I have been low-key working on a video on eco-anxiety, and each time I looked at it, it was giving me so much anxiety that I was not able to complete it, and then I procrastinated, and I have full season of my podcast. If you have not listened to this, you can do that. And now I'm doing a new video. So because I'm kind of fascinated by language and how it can be used as a weapon, and to continue a little bit on my series on logical fallacies, I decided to focus this video on a lesser known phenomena called thought-terminating cliches. And today we're going to talk about what they are and how they affect our mental health. So a thought-terminating cliche is a form of loaded language, often passing as wisdom, intended to end an argument and quell cognitive dissonance. Its function is to stop an argument from proceeding further, ending the debate with a cliche rather than a point. What it means is that these are phrases or statements that try to sound intelligent, but that really don't mean much and are kind of used to dismiss a discussion or to end a debate without any critical thinking. And they do that without addressing the underlying issue. So they're not always false, they're not always untrue, they're not lies. Sometimes they are, but they're kind of just empty. They just don't bring the conversation further. The first time that you probably encountered them was most likely when you were a kid, and it was in its most basic form when your parents or your caretaker were tired of you asking questions, and they would just say something like, well, it is what it is, or like, this is how the cookie crumbles. These are pretty basic, but they do get a little bit more nuanced and complicated than that. For example, a lot of politicians use them to avoid answering questions, like our friend Donald from down south, who answers so many of the questions that are asked to him in some version of, well, we'll be the best because we'll hire the best people to do the job. This is a sentence that has absolutely no substance to it. I guess it makes sense, and there's not really a debate that you can have, but it doesn't bring much to the conversation, you know? America will be great because we will make it great again. We're also seeing right now in real time how these cliches can be used to enable something as bad as the genocide that's happening in Gaza, right? It shuts down all of the debate by saying things like, anything you say against Israel is anti-Semitic, or Israel has a right to defend itself. Again, these phrases don't really mean anything, and they just cut the debate short without really bringing an argument that's interesting or valid. You might be noticing that thought-terminating cliches tend to be used by people in position of power, sometimes to maintain that power. And if you're noticing that, you would be right to notice it, because that's how the term was first popularized in Robert J. Lifton's book, Thought, Reform, and the Psychology of Totalism, published in 1961. So that explains why they're so popular amongst politicians or other people defending bad opinion, like Joe Rowling's transphobia. Women should be allowed to be safe in bat-rooms, one of her favorite thought-terminating cliches. Of course, they're also quite popular in the world of multi-level marketing companies, aka pyramid schemes, but we're not allowed to call them that, in which they spew so many of these cliches like, you've got to spend money to make money, or fake it until you make it. Using these cliches to motivate people to continue selling articles that are just not selling. Anyway, they're also obviously used in a lot of toxic relationships and abusive relationships because they're one of the most basic form of manipulation and to just shut down a conversation. However, because they're cliches and they're kind of widely used and widely spread, many of us have internalized them and we're kind of using them to hurt ourselves. And this is the number one way that I see thought-terminating cliches affecting our mental health. And I see many people using these cliches to erase their pain or minimize what they're experiencing. You've probably heard that a ton of times too, and maybe you've said it yourself, but the number of time that I've heard someone say something like, others have it way worse than me, or I have so many good things going on for me, I shouldn't complain. Like, sure, some people suffer a lot, and I'm sure that most of us can find people who have it way worse than what we have. But minimizing our own struggle is just invalidating. And you're not doing these suffering people any good by pretending like you yourself don't have any feelings. You might not live in a war zone or experience food insecurity, but it doesn't mean that you're not experiencing any discomfort. And like I say all the time, if you want for things to be better and you want to be an activist for the world to be a better place, it needs to include your own self-care. And that starts by not pretending like your own experience doesn't matter. And these cliches also prevent a lot of people from seeking help, saying things like, oh, my life is not bad enough for me to seek therapy, or to use resources. Other people need resources more than me. This leads us to the second way that I see thought-terminating cliches affect our mental health. It's the role that they play in toxic positivity. As you probably know, toxic positivity is this insecure way of looking at life as if nothing negative ever existed. And it is full of cliches. You can't always choose what happens to you, but you can always choose to be positive. Or, everything happens for a reason. When God closes a door, he opens a window. Or the old-time favorite, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You know, there's nothing wrong with a bit of positivity. Actually, it's quite nice. It really becomes an issue when it prevents further conversation, and more importantly, when it starts to block empathy. Because for someone to reach out to you and offer you the empathy that you need, the first step is that they need to hear your sadness. And I get it, most people resort to these cliches because they're uncomfortable with distress and with pain, and they don't know what to say, so they just grab to the first thing that comes to their brain. But being heard and having the time to explore all emotions, including the more difficult ones, is really important for healing. Toxic positivity cliches also create a lot of guilt and shame for people who are not able to snap out of it. And it can really increase stress and lead to social isolation, especially if they never feel like they're being heard properly. The number 3 way that thought-terminating cliches affect our mental health is a little bit hard to describe. It goes a little bit like promoting individualism and erasing privileges and the concept of the American dream all mixed together. And it's even more true when we remember that they're used with people with a lot of power. And that one is not always done with bad intention. As a cute example, I recently watched the finale of RuPaul's Drag Race season 16 and of UK versus the World. Yes, I watched both of them on the same day. Anyway, both the winners, they were full of good intentions, and I loved them. I rooted for them the whole season. But they both said something like, this is just the proof that you can do anything if you just put your mind into it, or if you just want it bad enough. And I get why they're saying this, right? It's like a cliche message of hope. But I couldn't help finding it so harsh that they would say this in front of the 20 other queens who did not win that season. And the reality is that no matter how much people want to win, in order to have one winner, you have to have a bunch of people to lose. And it's just not true that everyone can do it, because not everyone can be a winner. That's just not what winning is. And these 2 queens were incredible, full of talent, full of charisma. They deserved their win. And I understand the message of hope that they send, but it can really be hard for people to hear this, because if you sort of like flip it on itself, what it's saying is that if you're not successful, it's because you've not tried hard enough, or because you didn't want it enough. And honestly, that's just not how life works. But this is just one small example of how these cliches are used in the idea of like the American dream. And they reinforce individualism and they reinforce capitalism and all of these systems that are not so great for our mental health if we really think about it. And we love these stories, right? People who start from nothing and make it into the world and then win this competition. Not only do we love rooting for an underdog, but it also makes us believe that if it's possible for them, it's possible for everyone, and it's maybe possible for me. But we need not to forget that the overwhelming reality is that the vast majority of people who are successful in life come from a very successful family, and they have a very successful system backing them up. And it's the job of Hollywood to make us believe otherwise. And especially reality TV is very successful at making us forget about those systems. In that vein, there are also other cliches that sound a little bit like, well, I work really hard for what I have, and so should you. Or 2/3 of my salary go into paying rent. Why should homeless people have a free place to stay? You know, those cliches that make us more angry at poverty and poor people than being angry at the actual problem, the price of rent. These cliches serve to reinforce a concept that is called zero-sum thinking. And I really want to make a full video on the concept of zero-sum thinking, so I don't want to spend too much time on this right now. But you can see how they affect our mental health, right? By isolating us from each other and making us feel like struggling is just a part of being human. And sure, to live is to suffer, but that's another cliche, right? And it's not helping us solve poverty anytime soon. Finally, at number 4, I need to touch on the fact that these cliches also affect our mental health because of the way they're used to maintain systems of oppression. By helping keeping in place larger systems like racism, sexism, classism, transphobia, homophobia, thought-terminating cliches can make it a lot harder for us to work on our individual, but also on our collective well-being. You know, with phrases like, what about Men's International Day? Or hashtag not all men, or God said Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Again, they're just meaningless ways to stop a debate without really bringing anything to the table, but they do help keeping those big systems in place. And that includes the ones that are somewhat said in good faith, like love is love, or there's only one race, the human race. They only serve to erase differences and prevent people from exploring their own feelings and their own identity. Trust me, there is much more to my identity as a queer man than love is love. Aww. That's all for today. I hope you learned some new things and that maybe you will think twice before using one of these cliches against yourself or against someone else in the future. Please give me a thumbs up and let me know in the comment which one is your least favorite thought-terminating cliche. And remember that if you hated this video and everything that I said, well, we can always agree to disagree. Ciao.